So the previous 4 talks that I have done I've been sharing information, and this time it's going to be more interactive. I've come up with a way to a couple of things. One, I'm still bugged. It still just bugs me a little bit that I can't seem to settle the intangible distinction between the neurodivergent parts of ADHD, that they are different from neurotypical. And it still just bothers me that it's vague, that there's so many overlaps. And unlike something that is completely different from a normal state of being, all of the ADHD stuff is just so common to our human experience, right? There's almost everything that you experience as someone with this attention deficit, you also experience just as a human being who has human responses and emotions and feelings. And so the reason this bugs me is that I'm trying to figure out, like, when can I intervene? For over a decade now, I've been helping people sort out the stuck places of their life, the transitions of their life, right? So I would say that probably 13 years ago when I had my first client, I very well may have been dealing with somebody who had ADHD, because the type of people who seek coaching. So people who seek coaching, who will pay for it, invest in it, understand the value of it, tend to be people with high intelligence, people with high levels of creativity, people who are massively optimistic about their own ability to change, people that value possibility, people who are impulsive to a certain degree, right? Because it usually costs a bit. People are paying out of their pocket. They're not willing to just settle for, they'll get on the waiting list for the local counselor. They go out and they are really proactive about who they want to work with. All this stuff, their people tend to get a feel. Almost everyone that I've worked with, I know, feels me out. And then if it's a match, then they feel like, okay, yeah, this might be helpful. And all of those qualities are also tremendously associated with people who have ADHD, and then they get stuck, right? So I'm usually dealing with people who are like stuck in a place, despite the fact that they're really successful in other areas of their life. So it just occurs to me that probably so many of those people would have either full-blown ADHD, or certainly, because we know everything works on a spectrum and it's not black and white, it's not binary like a yes or a no, it's a spectrum. So probably people who orient toward having a lot of these aspects. And I want to make sure that I'm able to work with people wherever they are there. So I got a list, and I love this list that I was able to get, and I'm going to share it with you right now. It's a Word doc there. It's in the chat. And then let me open it here. So I got these beautiful examples, times that we have all experienced. We haven't all experienced them, but very common experiences that even the neurotypical experience, that give you a sense of what somebody who identifies with ADHD experiences all the time. So falling in love, the early part of falling in love, when you're in that hyperfocus, that feeling of you can't stop thinking about them, everything points to them, everything else blurs. This is a really good example of when the spiking in the brain is actually mimicking what happens to an ADHD brain. So very often when there's excitement or there's something that is drawing the attention, this is very much what it feels like. And you know how difficult it is to go to your office job and fill in budgets or fill out whatever employee reports or something when you're in the midst of that falling in love thing. It can be really hard to stay focused. This is exactly your brain as an ADHD brain. It's also the feeling of a deadline at 11 o'clock at night. So when you suddenly get that clarity, this happens to many people. I have spoken to many people that otherwise wouldn't identify as it, but they do know that sense of it just becomes suddenly available to you when it's urgent. And this is something that is really familiar for people who are in high octane jobs, like people who deal with like police or first responders. We deal with a lot of these people in trauma and who are coming to us for trauma. But the ADHD just is able to operate in that really high urgent state. And that's a lot what it feels like. The doom scrolling or binge watching, just being caught when your attention literally gets caught by something that you can't get it away from. This, I would say, the way people describe doom scrolling, I am so strict with myself that I don't get caught in doom scrolling, just because I legitimately just don't allow myself to do it. But it does happen to be sometimes with the news. But it also happens to be more often with things like going down a rabbit hole. It happens to me with a puzzle. If I start doing a puzzle, if I start painting, this is the feeling of you literally can't rip yourself away. It feels like you need someone to peel yourself away from the physical thing that you're doing. It gives you time blindness, all that stuff. When you've had a really bad night of sleep, this is something that allows you to imagine what it's like to have this foggy where you can't quite access your own brain, is commonly what it's experienced being tipsy. So for those of you that there's that beautiful study, Janine, you know this one, where I think it's the third drink. There's like 2.8 drinks or something like that. You can jump in, Jay, if you know this better than me. But it's like the exact type of tipsiness, level of tipsiness, where somebody actually loves being. And you essentially, pint and a half is where somebody has that feeling of the alcohol gives you whatever alcohol gives you, and sort of lifty uppy thing, and you're a little bit more open and all that kind of stuff. But once you go past that, you get into the sloppy stuff, right? Then everything just goes downhill, but everybody's trying to keep this lift that they get at a pint and a half, and it's impossible because you're either going to lose it or go beyond the threshold. But that little tipsy state is a really familiar feeling of what it feels like to have this sort of ADHD giddiness of being excited about an idea, about a new beginning, something that's really taking your attention and has you. I could relate both easily back and forth. Okay, I won't go through it, but you can see here the honeymoon phase of a new job, acute stress. So, when you've had the type of stress, most of us have experienced something in our life where it's so profoundly grieving something that has happened that we literally can't access our brain. Seems like it's not working. You just can't. Something has happened, and all of a sudden you don't know how to do the sequence of finding your keys, getting in the car. These simple things just aren't available to you. Loud, chaotic restaurants. If you've ever has anyone ever had, you're trying to focus on what somebody's saying, but you can't quite hear, and it's the worst experience. That can be very similar to it as well. What it's like. And this is where I think it's really vitally important to understand that we're never dealing with Kim White and every ADHD person has had a calm moment, has had a neurotypical moment as well. They've had a million exchanges in their life where their neurology is acting like everybody else's. They're just like at the bank doing an exchange. Everything's available. They're totally fine, right? So the in and out of this, and what is diagnosable is the frequency, right? So what's diagnosable is, first of all, the early on. If this only started happening to you in your 40s, it's probably not ADHD. It could be that it was like latent ADHD that really got uncovered by the hormones coming apart and doing what they do, but probably not. Not if for the first 40 years of your life, you literally didn't have any of this going on. Everything was available. You were sharp as a knife. You were totally able to manage everything. And then all of a sudden you hit 45 or 50 or whatever, and it starts to go on you. That's almost for sure going to be hormonal and not actually ADHD. But if what you're realizing is like, it's always been there, but it got worse in your 40s or 50s, then it's probably a combination of both. I also just want to pay attention to just being emotionally sensitive. So there are definitely people who are just more highly emotional than highly sensitive, highly emotional, whatever you want to call it, but they just have a really wide range of emotion. And that is not always associated with anything other than that person has come through nature and nurture. Who knows? That person has come in with a really sensitive system in terms of emotionality. And that can be all on its own. That is definitely not necessarily related, but it can look like it a lot. The other file, I sent it in an email, and I would really like to talk to you guys about this because I get dismayed as a coach when I feel like I've done really good work with someone. I really genuinely have helped them heal. I've helped them overcome some habits that have been limiting for them. We've shifted beliefs about their own limitations, whatever I've done. We've cleared trauma. They don't have trauma responses anymore, all that kind of stuff. And yet, I don't see that their maturity has gotten any better than it was, say, 4, 6, 8 weeks ago when I began with them. And it throws me for a loop every time, because it's just very confusing to me that we can do all of this work, which to me just seems like it would be embedded in, if you are no longer reactive, right? You were traumatized by, say, you were like assaulted by a certain type of person. And whenever you see that certain type of person, you have a trauma reaction. And then we do the healing work. And now you're okay, right? You can be okay in the company of a certain type of person, all that kind of stuff. When that's healed, it just makes sense to me that there would be a part of you that would step into the blossoming, into this, oh, I've been seeing the world this way. And now through my healing, I can see the world with more open eyes. I can be less judgmental of others. I can be more perceptive of the complicated affairs of human beings, all that kind of stuff. And yet so often that is not what I witness. It's not what I experience. And so it has just baffled me for such a long time. And then I started getting into this ADHD neurodiversity stuff and wondering where neurology fits in with how a person actually matures as opposed to all the other stuff. And really what I came down to was it just lifted my spirit today when I realized that the actual definition of maturity is fundamentally knowing who you are and remaining unchanged, which does not mean that you stay a robot and you don't respond. It means you remain unchanged in your values, in your beliefs, in your aligned way of being, despite what happens around you. True maturity is that you never give yourself an excuse to say, normally I'm a calm person, but that bitch, when she did, what do you expect me to do? And then like all of a sudden give yourself this excuse to behave in a way that is completely outside. People who continually make excuses for their own behavior. So people who will say things like, I never normally do this, but these are signs of immaturity, right? These are signs of somebody who is outside of alignment with themselves. And so realizing that my whole bent, if anyone has been looking at what I've been doing over the last year or two, is my realization that what I really fundamentally want to do is I want to work with people on understanding who they are. And the definition of maturity being knowing who you are. So what people do outside of you doesn't change who you are. And it involves things like being able to regulate your nervous system, understanding that just because my heart is racing right now does not mean I give myself permission to behave in a way that is against my values, right? I'm not going to belittle somebody. I'm not going to point at somebody and blame them or make somebody feel shame just because I'm feeling uncomfortable. Just because I am surprised. I expected them to agree with me. They don't agree with me. And all of a sudden, I recognize my state has changed. Maturity is noticing the state change and saying, okay, wait, this is not what I expected. This is not what I wanted, maybe. This is not whatever. But who am I? Like, how do I want to respond to this? And so it's a big ask. Very few people pull it off perfectly. Most of us don't even do it particularly well, but it is definitely to aspire to. And I think what creates people that are truly happy with themselves and are looking for what everybody else is chasing, what everybody else is paying money for, what everybody else is hoping the next thing that they buy is going to create in them is this sense of settled, grounded, just being satisfied and content with who they are. And I really do think that this is one of the most direct ways to get there. So this document that you're looking at, this me workshop. It clicked when I started saying a couple of weeks ago, like, you're going to use ADHD because that's where my focus has been for a while. But I'm pretty sure you could do, I'm not pretty sure, I know for sure, you could do it with autism. You could do it with your race. You could do it with your religion. You could do it with anything that defines you. Anything that is somehow associated to or embedded in your identity. You could do it as a teacher, as a musician. You could do it as I don't know, whatever are the parts of your identity. You could do this same sort of analysis on it. What's really interesting in the ADHD part is that because there is this neurological link to, oh, I'm not just a lazy I'm not inconsiderate. I'm not lazy. I actually have a brain that is just way harder to get it to activate to those things that actually align to what I would like to imagine myself to be someone who is always considerate of other people's time, of other people's money, of other people's energy, of other people's whatever. But it's harder for me than it is for a lot of people because of the way my brain's wired. But that doesn't change the fact that I highly value consideration between human beings. So if you look at this sheet, I would love if you actually went through the process of doing this. Obviously, we will not do a full exploration of them, but I need to get them up here. Split my screen. Okay. So the top doesn't matter. You can read that later. So the first part here says, getting lost in the moment and losing track of time. Guys, this is irrelevant to you, but Katherine, I'm going to ask you to do the explanation of the threshold after we go through this, and then I'm going to ask you to jump in and give that explanation. Okay. So things that are commonly associated with ADHD are getting lost in the moment and losing track of time. What I would like you to do is just put a little check mark, or however you want to do this. Do it however you want to do it. But note the ones that you identify with. And everybody has lost track of time sometime. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, is this a pattern? Is this something that you regularly do? If you regularly do it, check it. If you don't regularly do it, leave it alone. So getting lost in a moment and losing track of time. I would have to check that because it happens to me every single day, numerous times. Rushing everything to the last possible minute and doing your best work right there. So this is what's important, guys, is if you have procrastinated much of your life, but you actually secretly know or feel like you do pull off your best work when you operate that way. If you start 3 projects with total conviction and you finish, you could change 3 to 5 or 10, whatever is appropriate. I'd probably have to change it to 6, start 6, finish 1. Interrupting. This is such an ADHD trait, interrupting, because if you don't say it now, it's gone. It's really tough for most people with ADHD to hold inside themselves. Walking into a room, forgetting what you came for. I just assumed everybody did this. I thought it was weird that old people thought it was just old people because I assumed everybody did, but it could be that I've done it my whole life for this reason.
Can I say something to that just quickly? I work
Sure.
with 4 and 5-year-olds. 4 and 5-year-olds. I'm sorry, I got my earbuds.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, sorry. Age girl is interrupting. So, anyways, 4 and 5-year-olds, and constantly they would walk into another room, forget why they're there, and go. They would literally do boy like that,
Yeah.
like kids do, and they'd be like, "Oh!" And the difference between them and us, that's what this is my conclusion in the moment. They don't care.
Yeah,
They
right?
don't care.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a wash.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Anyways,
interesting.
sorry,
No, it's
interrupting.
great. That's great. It's great.
It was so cute too.
Getting lost, like actually getting lost, turned around somewhere you've been many times, like just your mind wanders. Those of you that have, where you do
Driving.
a familiar route. Yeah.
Driving a bus every day and then forgetting where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's critical.
Yeah. Just losing things, zoning out mid conversation and missing the middle of what some people say. Very common. Needing motion or noise in the background to actually concentrate. Saying yes to everything exciting and then drowning in what you agreed to do. So those are some of the things that are very ADHD type things. Now look at the next one. The next one is more about this hormonal stuff. So again, these are not exclusive, of course, right, guys? But these are more traditionally, more likely to be associated one to the other. Rage that arrives out of nowhere over something small. Crying at things that never used to move you. Waking at 3 a.m. with your mind already racing. Words disappearing mid-sentence. Patience running out faster than it used to. Feeling like a stranger in your own body. Sadness that rolls in with no clear cause and rolls back out just as fast. Wanting to cancel plans that you'd normally be excited for. skin or body sensations that feel unfamiliar, a new, sharper need to be alone. So I put hormonal. I didn't put perimenopause or menopause on this because I think that we would also be dealing with any sort of hormonal imbalance, right? There's a million different ways that your hormones can get out of whack in pregnancy, but also things like heavy metals in your system, or there's just so many ways, right? Where you could list so many ways where the hormones may get out of whack. And so it doesn't need to be that you're 45 and dealing with perimenopause. It could be that you're 25 and you're dealing with something that has really shifted your hormones, right? Birth control pills. There's a million different ways. Okay. And then the sensitive one I added because I just feel like it's really important and hard to talk about sometimes because it's not connected to something diagnosable. All of them can be, of course. But I think there is also just these sensitive people wearing your feelings on your sleeve. So when your face just gives you away, always believing it might work out, even against evidence. This could be an ADHD sort of possibility. Ooh, everything's getting so excited. It could also so be this really strong sensitivity to you're so pulled toward an emotion that you want to feel that you create it. And so it's easier to create something that you can move toward. The Enneagram 7s will all identify with this. Many of the ENFPs, Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, leaving the door unlocked because you don't believe anything bad will happen. These are like people who really want to believe in their own ideologies, people who really want to believe in emotions that bring them positive. You could also, of course, have this in the negative. I just put a spattering of positive and negative. Crying often and easily at things that wouldn't move somebody else, replaying a conversation days after it's over. Yeah, I would say that naive is probably an emotional state. Beliefs too. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I had actually I almost put this as gullible, like a gullibility, or it's a desire to want to feel a certain way so often and being really sensitive to things that can allow you to feel certain ways. Overly trusting. Yeah. Yeah. Believing that if you don't trust, it means then that you have to feel like there's something negative out there. And if you don't want to feel that way, then you better keep trusting and believing. Yeah, trusting people quickly, needing real recovery time after being around people, which is deeply introverted, but it can also be a sensitivity thing. Feeling responsible for how everyone else is in the room. Okay, the reason that I put it here is because of what I'm asking you to do with this exercise. So I continually said in the beginning, ADHD initially because it was in the beginning diagnosed because it was seen as primarily being problematic. Ages ago, decades and decades ago, when they were noticing that it was problematic for little kids who couldn't learn in school because they were so hyperactive, they were really looking at all the negative traits. And for the most part, still, when people think of or what they associate to ADHD and these other neurodivergences is the negative traits, right? But I kept emphasizing, and I'm still there, that what is so imperative is to filter out what is it that you want to keep that you actually believe is who you are, whether it's some sort of neurodivergence, whether it comes from God or the universe directly, whether it's some sort of conditioning that you appreciate is in you, whether it's a set of values that you inherited that you now do really value in a positive way. If it has been a way that you have been praised or experienced a lot of positive feedback from, like a lot of people grew up being the comedian, right? The fact that they were like the one who walks into the room and forgets them, but it's been met with affection. It's been met with, or people who are super, super smart. And the fact that there's joked about being the absent-minded professor has been something that they really identify well with. They like the fact that they can't do a coffee order, but they can solve some sort of high-level math. They love that about themselves and wouldn't want to change it. So this is what I'm asking you to do, is to go through that list, all the ones that you checked as being ones that you identify with, that you feel like are part of who you are, good or bad, or anything else that it makes you think of. Okay, so anything else, I covered 1% of what is possible in the ways that you could think of yourself or that you could identify with. So if you're doing this right on the paper or somewhere else, if there's anything else that comes to mind, then write that down as well. Just think about these traits. And I would ask these 6 questions. So I'm going to go through the 6 questions, and then I'm going to get Katherine to explain something to you. So the first question, is this me? So if you go back up to some of the ones that you picked, and feel free to jump in here, guys. Feeling like a stranger in your own body, I would argue that probably doesn't feel like you. Maybe it does. Maybe it's so familiar to you that you have felt like a stranger in your body since the day you can remember consciously being aware that it actually feels familiar and you in a way that you wouldn't want to change. But I think that would be very unusual. Something like that is probably an unwelcome feeling. But something like patience running out faster than it used to, while this may be, you could blame it on hormonal shifts. I have heard this beautiful, I struggle as I got older, I struggled more and more and more with PMS. I don't think I had like a PPMD or whatever, but I did have very severe PMS. And the older I got, the worse it got after children. So before children, I would cycle. I never knew when I was getting my period. It never mattered. I didn't feel like I changed at all. And I get into my 40s, and all of a sudden, the 5 days before my period comes, I feel like I am in a dark tunnel of hell because it's so hard. It's so hard. And everything, it just feels really hopeless. So you get into this hormonal stuff, but there's certain, oh, sorry, the way that was described to me, I lost my thought. The way that was described to me once was there's this tendency to think that when women are hormonal because of their cycle or because of menopause, but particularly in their cycle, that they're like, that's the bitchy part when they're not themselves. Right. This is when women end up being like irritable and bitchy and all that stuff. But the truth is that it's actually just when you don't have all of those hormones that are the nurturing hormones, the one that make you be able to have children and not want to strangle your own children, even though most of us want to strangle our own children sometimes. But these are the hormones that allow us to look at their beautiful little faces. And even though they're little rascals half the time, we still nurture and care for them, right? And it's those hormones that allow us to do. And in that little phase, right before you get your period, you don't have so much of that going through your system. And so you're not, in a way, you could look at it as that's the realist version of you. That's when you're not covering up the things that are actually irritants in your life, are not being covered up by these other hormones that make you be able to cope with. And so we need to make sure we're not looking at it as though when you're feeling impatient or irritable, whatever, that's the not you, as opposed to the other. And so something like patience running out faster than it used to could, in fact, be a welcome change. Maybe that's something that you have absolutely no interest in, like a coach or somebody else in the personal development world coming and saying, oh, let's figure out how you can get back to being more patient. Maybe you've actually hit a point in your life where you're like, you know what? Fuck that. I'm so tired. I have been patient for 45 years. I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to be impatient sometimes when he says that or she does this or whatever. And it could be something that you actually want to embrace. You may decide that you want to modify it so that it's appropriate to the situation, but it may not be something that you automatically want to change just because it's come through a hormone shift. And of course, the same is true of all of these ones that are ADHD ones and sensitivity ones, right? I have worked with a lot of women, a lot of them, who have asked me to help them stop crying because they're in corporate situations. They're in situations where it's really embarrassing for them to tear up. Right? They're often in like an office situation or they're running a meeting or something. And I remember a woman that ran a charity and she was trying to raise millions and millions of dollars for this charity. She had a board she had to answer to. She had children who relied on her to raise this money. But when she went to a board meeting and she would all be crying half the time, all these millionaires or the people that would be the investors in this they weren't seeing her as being like a serious businesswoman that they could invest $2 million in, who was going to use the money appropriately and have a really logical mind about how to do it well. And so it was really important that she actually could stand there, express herself and not cry. because of everybody else's reaction, right? So there's lots of that going on. But then there's also a lot of women and men who run the campaign of, I want to live in a world where you're allowed to cry at a board meeting. I want to live in a world where it's okay to cry, whatever, whenever, and God bless them, right? Those are both such valid and important ways of wanting to deal with this. Okay, I am beating a dead horse, I think. So, is this me? Answer that as it's you. Does it align with my values? This is really important to notice this particular trait about yourself. If you were to pick one of them right now just to work through and answer from your gut intuitively, does it align with my values? Do I want this to represent who I am? Do I like this in me? 3 and 4 are two very different questions. There are certain things about myself that I actually don't really want to represent me. But the truth is, I love them about myself. It's just that I know that they don't bring me to my goals very well. But I really like this part of me. I'm the gullible one. I'm the one who doesn't lock the doors. I'm the one who lives in this overly trusting world. It actually bothers me to really, I fight really hard with, I live in Canada, for God's sake. I live in the safest place. Why would I lock my front door on a Tuesday afternoon? To me, it offends my spirit to have to lock my front door, and I just won't do it. When I know that my chance is 1 in 100,000, but I don't know, more than that, 1 in whatever, that somebody is going to walk into my house and rob me, I would rather live in a world where I keep my door unlocked because it makes me feel like I live in the world that I want to live in. And that is something that I love about myself. Do I want this to necessarily represent who I am? Not really. I see the flaw. I recognize that it's a little, so some of these things I really want you to just make sure you're really evaluating exactly the question here. Is this a response to fear or pain in my life? So is it a behavior that comes from something that you're getting away from instead of something you're moving toward? It's really what you're asking here. And then finally, after you've done all this, do I want to keep this? So the fact that I get totally lost in time, do I want to keep that? Hell yeah. I don't want to be coached away. What's that, Lee?
Sorry, can you put them in the chat? Because I think I
Oh,
missed.
sorry.
Yeah, it takes me a little bit longer, and you're explaining as you're doing.
Do you mean that? What do you mean, Lee?
Yeah.
Do you have the document open in front of you?
Yeah, but I don't see, are the questions on the document?
Yeah, just go down.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, I didn't explain that at all. Yeah, if you
No,
go
I
down
didn't.
below.
I thought that was the end of the document after page 2. So I was like, what's the next one?
Yeah, keep up, would you?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God. And she's saying it and I'm trying and she's still talking and I want to make
memory.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot for my brain. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I put it down below.
Got it. And we're doing this for all the ones that we checked off.
You could. Like I said, we're obviously not doing that now, but yes, absolutely.
Okay.
This is something that I will be doing with my clients. I have already done this with one client, and I will do this with my clients going forward because I think it is such a better way to deal with this than working through it without asking these questions. It's that simple. And what you're going to come out with is a really strong sense that you could follow every one of these questions if you decided to really make a go of this with why. Do I like this in me? Why? Is this a response to fear or pain in my life? Why? Do I want to keep it? Why? And then once you have these things separated, once you're able to actually have your list of, okay, here's the ones I want to keep. And here's the ones that I do not want to keep. They're problematic and getting in my way. Now we have something really useful to work with. Right now, I think it would be so useful to start to do all of the embracing, accepting. I am keeping this, so I may need to make some changes in my life that allow me to move with this. And then there are other ones that you don't want to keep. And those are the ones that you would do some pretty traditional NLP stuff with, right? Like clear them away, figure out where your belief came from, shift IRs, like all of the normal stuff that we do with it, plus some additional stuff that would be more appropriate. Okay, I know I walked you through that really quickly, but I would like Katherine to explain something to you that she knows better than I do. But this nervous system regulation stuff, so this definition of maturity, this to me, this way of going about it, asking these questions, identifying it, the purpose for me is to be able to walk into actually becoming a more mature version of yourself by learning who you are, deciding who you are, so that you have a more intentional, conscious understanding of who you are, so that when you face all the stuff out there, you actually know what you're coming back to, right? You actually have an understanding of what you want to be. But your nervous system is going to try and fuck you every time. Because your nervous system has nothing to do with this paper. And so we have these thresholds, and Catherine's going to explain something about the nervous system.
So I actually have slide for this, 2 slides for this. So you may be, are you seeing my slide or the notes? Okay, cool. So this concept is called the window of tolerance, which some of you might be familiar with. It comes from Dr. Dan Siegel. And essentially, the window of tolerance is that sweet spot between hyper aroused and hypo aroused. So hyper aroused is when you flipped your lid, you're angry, out of control, anxious, that buzzy feeling, right? The aroused nervous system. That's when you're more likely to explode or snap at your partner or say things you regret, that kind of thing. The flip side of that is hypoarousal, where you're zoned out, spacey, maybe depressed, maybe frozen, maybe lethargic. And that sweet spot is the window of tolerance where you can tolerate enough, whether it's stimulation or emotional content, without becoming so dysregulated that you're out of control, but also not shutting down. And the goal of, I think, our coaching work, and certainly I work with parents, certainly my work with parents, the goal is to expand that window so that you have more space between the stimulus and the response, right? So that when something happens that triggers you or is upsetting, or you notice yourself doing that annoying ADHD habit or pattern that you do, that you have more time before you either lose it or shut down. And so the nervous system work, I think Tara and I were talking about this earlier today, what you having tools available to you that you're doing before you're in a state where you actually need them. Because oftentimes when we are in the state where we need those tools, our brain is just offline and we can't access them. I find this especially with kids, that it's like a lot of parents want to teach their kids like taking deep breaths or doing things that will calm the nervous system. But I think kids, particularly neurodivergent kids, actually have a pretty hard time accessing that in the moment unless they've had just a ton of practice with it when they're not dysregulated. So is there more you want? Oh, actually, let's see. Oh, yeah. I have a little bit more detail of what this looks like for kids and what this looks like for parents, because again, that's my field. But yeah, maybe that's not as relevant for
It's
us
great.
here.
This is great. Leave it there for a sec so we can,
Yeah.
because there are those of you that are parents, but I think this applies to anyone, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
Hypo-aroused. Katherine, when someone is crying, like when they're really crying, sobbing, is it hypo or hyper? Would it depend? Could it be both, either?
I think it depends, right? I think there's the really activated, like anxious crying, which is an, I think you can tell, right? I think you can feel it when it's more of an anxiety response than when it's a shutting down.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the distinction is it you just can't even, and so you're just like completely shut down? Or is it the panic attack? I know lots of women in particular experience panic by just uncontrollable crying.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
different than like
Going inside and the
Yeah.
weeping where you can't, which seems like the opposite. Yeah,
I think it's related also to, in clinical terms, we would say externalizing versus like internalizing behaviors, right? So I think of the hyper aroused as more externalizing, like other people are going to be more affected by it, right? It's going to be this intense outpouring versus more, I feel like internalizing can be a lot more subtle and quieter and affect other people less.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you. I want to add one more thing here. Okay, so the reason I wanted Katherine to bring this in is because it's really important to know what to do when this stuff happens, because when it does happen, when you get into this when the nervous system betrays you, essentially, it's not a really fair way to talk about your nervous system because it's actually doing exactly what it's meant to do. But when it betrays your conscious thought, the difficulty that I have, and every coach that I have ever spoken to, worked with, mentors, anything has, is that we teach really great tools. But when you're in the heat of it, when you're really at either side, you're almost completely unable to access the part of your brain that you need to do the tools. So box breathing is great, but we have all been in states where having to stop what we're doing and decide that we're going to do box breathing is just not an option, because you're like on the subway and you went the wrong way and you have to react to what's going on and you're freaking out, or somebody's yelling at you, like actually being aggressive with you, and you don't, whatever the situation is, there are these things where you actually can't access it. And very often it happens internally as well, right? Like if you haven't ever walked around your house just spinning, and I would like to know what you're doing, because I think we've all had that experience of, even though it's happening all inside of ourselves, it's so intense that to dislodge it, we know that we could do something, right? We could always get up into peripheral vision. There's all these other things, but you need your cognitive brain to be on side. It actually has to want to do those things.
Tara, it's how unhelpful and annoying it is when you're not calm and someone's calm down, Tara. Right. And I think we do it to ourselves too. And that's part of why we can't access the tool. And part of it is that our thinking brain is just offline, right? So you can't access it. But even if you're like, oh, I could do peripheral vision right now, and that would be really helpful, you resist your own suggestion to yourself.
And exactly. And sometimes you don't even want to, right? It's like you're so fired up about the thing, you don't even want to feel better, because with good reason, because often the emotion itself does need to move, right? It isn't going to be useful to just figure out how to transform it into something else right then and there. But I just wanted these things that I was looking at in terms of the hyperarousal. So when you're flooded, it is true that you're not going to be able to access the part of your brain that is going to do anything logical, right? So counting, all that kind of stuff. But what does work? There's a woman who wrote a book, and had a mentorship with Fritz Perls and worked with Steve Andreas. And she was talking about pleasure, and she refers to, well, we know a lot about the mind body, there is also body mind, right? So this is where you actually want to get into body mind. So when the nervous system is weighing out and your brain is not really online to do the cognitive stuff, things like getting your body to actually give the cue to your brain that you are safe, that you can take a breath, that you can recalibrate yourself. So just exhaling. So forget about box breathing. Anything that requires counting is not likely going to be effective. But no matter how bad you feel, sometimes if you can just remember that exhaling, you got to breathe anyway. So just focus on the exhaling. It will actually allow your body in time just to actually slow down your heart rate, right? It's going to bring your heart rate down. It's going to put you into a more sort of physiological state where you can do that. Also, the old throwing water in your face. So cold on the face or the back of the neck triggers the dive reflex, which is this downshifting heart rate involuntarily. So even if whatever you can do, if you're really feeling flooded, if you can go get cold on your face, cold on your neck, even if you can't follow your own instructions at the time, and even if you're resisting, if your past self can advise you enough to know that you do need to settle down right now, it's going to be helpful. You could do that. And then discharging with movement, right? So just being able to actually shake it out. So any of the things that you could do, throwing things safely, shaking your body, stomping, any of that kind of stuff is actually really effective, which is hilarious that we always tell. I'm sure, Katherine, you could write a whole endless essays on this, but we tell kids not to do this stuff when really we should be really encouraging kids to let the emotions move physically through their bodies. And we should as well. Humming is one I didn't know this, I just learned this today, but vibration in the throat stimulates the vagus nerve. So just humming is actually, so no words, just humming. And for the opposite, for the hypoarousal, I realize we're just after 9, so I'll do this quickly, but when you're numb, when you're shut down, which in my experience actually happens to people more than the other. The other tends to be so raucous to the system that you have to do something about it. But you can go years and years and years and years with this hypoarousal, this like shutting down, numbing out, everything going into this really hypoarousal. And what you don't want to do are things that are going to make you even more calm. So it's actually true that like you don't want to do some of the breathing stuff that's going to make you more calm. It would be useful to do meditation because that gets you present, but it isn't useful just to do the breathing stuff. So this is where it's just movement, right? All of the old stuff that we've always heard about, just movement, exercise, walking, anything that actually gets you into movement. The worst thing you can do for yourself is lay there in bed. Bright lights, cold water. So this was also really interesting, which I just learned, but cold water on the wrists will actually do the opposite of what cold water on the face or the neck will do. So if you get cold water on your wrist, bright light, anything that is like a sharp sensory input, if you're really feeling like you can't get out of a state, these are ways that you could actually help yourself get out of the state without having to like psychoanalyze, which isn't always useful. Sometimes just the body needs to inform the mind that like, hey man, we're alive. We've got a whole body here that is in support of whatever we need to do to get out of this state, to start moving things, changing things, even sour things in your mouth, like anything that is really sharp and sensory, loud and fast, right? So anything, music, anything that is like going to stimulate can actually, and I'm not talking in a hokey way, guys. This is when you're in that state where like you feel that sort of hopelessness and your nervous system is just so low and you actually want to get, I shouldn't say you actually want to get out of it, but you can't get a thought, because I think we all get really obsessed. I do this. This is so familiar to me. This like you feel way down here. So what you try and do is you start rolling the thoughts around, hoping to find the thought that is going to lift you out of it. But I'm telling you that very often that isn't going to work. Or by the time it does work, you've wasted a whole day or a week or a month or whatever. It's not a thought necessarily that is going to get you out of this. You are more than just your thinking head. Your thoughts aren't even you. So if you can bypass that, if that's not working for you, forget about your thoughts and try and get your body to actually activate and stimulate and create some alchemy within you that is going to shift your nervous system, which is going to access. Then you'll potentially be able to access the thoughts that are going to be able to get you out. This doesn't have to be like a final, conclusive, carved in stone, this is who I am. But a working definition of this is who I am, I would be so interested to have you experience what it's like to make a statement like that, and then bring it with you for a little while into different situations in your life, into your relationships, into the easy ones, into the hard ones, into your own typical way of responding to yourself, to your colleagues, to your children. And when you can really hold that middle place of who I am, then it likely will become clearer to you where you maybe need to work on your nervous system responses, where you actually do have some old stuff historically that is keeping you really limited. It just would add clarity to the work that you want to do and what you can just accept as is.